You know, before we get into the remarks, I just want to say thank you to Bank of America for hosting us today, as well as the Taipei Economic and Cultural Offices for helping coordinate this amazing event. So, Peter, you bring a pretty unique, informed perspective on the semiconductor world. As Senior Vice President of TSMC, you advise one of the most consequential businesses in the world, a company that's now valued at over $1.7 trillion when it was just a startup 30 years ago, and not even. But you come from it with a very unique perspective. As someone that's been at Capitol Hill, Chief of Staff to Senator Feinstein, a lawyer, and I'm just thrilled to have you here and share the stage with you today. Just to set the stage a little bit, we're going to talk about TSMC, geopolitics, innovation in microchips, emerging technologies, and what we think we can see around the corner. So with that, I don't know if you have any opening words or you want to go right into questions.
Sure. Well, let me start by thanking you, Haven and mHUB, for inviting me. What an incredible place. I got a tour earlier and talked to a few people here that are innovating and doing wonderful things. And it reminded me of TSMC and the history of TSMC, which started in 1987. Thanks to an organization called ITRI, the Industrial Technology Research Institute in Taiwan, as a startup. It was public sector R&D money coming from the Taiwanese government, betting on a new model for silicon fabrication. And we have Taiwanese officials here. I'm so honored to have the director of the TechRo office here, the deputy director in Mingya. Thank you for coming. So it was from a place like this that TSMC grew into the 7th most valuable company in the world and joined hands with another impressive startup 5 or 6 years later, with a man that was down to $500,000, $750,000 bucks, because he had an idea to start his own company called NVIDIA. So they're pretty big now too. It's great to be here, and I was looking at the list of people, and it's a pretty high-end crowd in terms of technology and your background. So I really look forward to talking to Haven and talking about TSMC and what we do in terms of making the greatest chips in the world.
Tonight's program is called Industry Disruptors, right? And when TSMC launched in 1987, it came with a completely different business model than industry had previously been adopting in semiconductors. Can you talk a little bit about the unique model and how it created economies of scale and really allowed you guys to create dominance in the space?
Right. Dr. Morris Chang had an idea in the mid-1980s. He'd been at TI, he'd been here, he came out of MIT, he went home to Taiwan. And he had a business idea, he had a technology idea, he wanted to innovate, and he created the foundry model for just making chips. Now, that may sound a little boring. It's just pure manufacturing, pure production. But instead of combining silicon design, chip design, which is, let's say in the front row here, you're the CEO of AMD, you're the CEO of Marvell, you're Jensen Huang, you sort of look like, I don't know if you look like Jensen. Those guys are designers. They're software designers. And the brilliant idea that Morris Chang had was to split design and fabrication. And all he was focused on was the foundry model and setting up an iterative relationship with Lisa Su and Jensen Huang. They do the design, they send us a GDS2 file, and then we go back and forth with them to perfect the silicon, the integrated circuit that they want. And that turned out to be, in terms of the specialization, an extraordinary idea that over time has built the company into the pure bleeding edge maker of integrated circuits.
So for simple people like me, explain what an integrated circuit or a semiconductor is. Bring it way down.
Well, this is not a simple, this is a pretty high-end crowd, so I think you know what a semiconductor does. So chips are everywhere. They're everywhere in this room. So let's through a show of hands, who has an iPhone? Right, so how many, over here, how many semiconductors, what do you have, a 15, 16, 17? 15? I have a 15, I have 15 Pro. How many semiconductors do you think are in that phone? 170. So there's an applications processor, there's a baseband modem, which designed by Qualcomm. We make it, then Apple puts it in there, so there's an uplink communications ability. There's a PMIC, a power management integrated circuit. There's sensor chips from Sony. There are RF chips. There are thousands of them in this room. And so a semiconductor is a functionality for voltage, for electricity, to come into a device, into a piece of silicon to manage data, organize data, project data into these different types of chips. It could be a GPU, it could be a CPU, it could be an FPGA, lots of different types of chips. And what we do is we make them. The other people, like right here, Apple designs, let's say you work for Apple. Apple designs their own chips. They use Broadcom and others, but they also design their own applications processor, send the design to us, and iteratively we go back and forth to make it for them and send it back to them. We're fairly anonymous. We want the fabless companies to get all the credit. We like the market cap. We like our market cap of our company, but we are all about customer trust and satisfaction and performance in terms of their product.
Let's talk a little bit about you. I mean, background, Bachelor of Arts, Columbia, JD from Georgetown. How do you get to be in the role you are today at TSMC? Talk us through your journey.
Well, there's some public policy folks, I think maybe in the room. I was looking at the list a few minutes ago, and I was interested in public service, and I was interested in the law. I worked at a law firm for a couple of years, and I was much less interested in being a corporate lawyer. That wore off very quickly. But I worked on Capitol Hill for many, many years for Senator Feinstein, moving through the ranks, and eventually as her top aide. And there was one woman from Senator Duckworth's office. I don't know if she made it. Her name was J. Lee Germain. She was a legislative correspondent, or is right now, for Senator Duckworth. She was on the attendance list. I did that. I did all the scout work on Capitol Hill, and I loved it. And when I got to that top rung, I got to meet Craig Barrett, who was the chairman and CEO of Intel, and then a incredible man named Irwin Jacobs, who founded a company called Qualcomm. And in working with individuals like that, I needed to eventually go to the private sector. And Craig and Paul Otellini at Intel needed assistance federally. You know, Washington, on a regulatory basis, on a statutory basis, on a policy edict basis, as you watch President Trump, it's mind-boggling how powerful the rules are, and it's important for companies to be able to navigate effectively. So I had been in government for a long time, and then my wife, you know, I had one of those 11:30 p.m. discussions about paying tuition bills, and she didn't work, and it was a short discussion. I wanted to stay in government my whole life, but She changed my mind very quickly at about 11:35 p.m. And the next day, I accepted Intel's offer, and that was about 16, 17 years ago. And that was my entry into the chip business.
Amazing. And today you're at such a unique moment in TSMC's history. For the first time, they're looking outside Taiwan to build up production. What's leading to those decisions, and why US, Japan, and Germany as the locations for building and making huge investments?
That's a good question. Taiwan is home base in terms of the extraordinary R&D we do there. The STEM talent in the world is incredible. At Carnegie Mellon, at Caltech, my alma mater, Columbia, in Germany, the company has grown so fast and is so big that we need to diversify the footprint and also go to where the customers are. I mentioned AMD, the CEOs of it's very nice, the CEOs of AMD, Marvell, and other companies to be here this evening, but they are here. 75% of the customer base is here, and so you want to innovate next to the customer. So we're building out in Phoenix. We've announced 6 wafer fabs, 2 advanced packaging fabs, which is crucial for AI, how you package different types of chips together. We are rolling there, 1 fab up and running at N4, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 on time, on track in terms of bleeding edge silicon here. 2 fabs in Japan, in Kumamoto, in great shape. We're building out our footprint in Germany. You'll continue to see expansion abroad, which is quite natural for a $1.7 trillion company, the most important semiconductor company in the world. You know, NVIDIA is important, but because we make all of their chips, there's an argument that TSMC is even more crucial. And so the home base remains Hsinchu, Tainan, Kaohsiung, Junan, but growing abroad where the customers are makes perfect sense.
And talk to me a little bit about Arizona. Like, how do you end up in Arizona? What are like the key competitive advantages that you saw there that made TSMC want to make that investment?
In 2019, 3 of us scoured the country. We were looking for spots. We didn't come to Chicago. Maybe we should have, if we'd known about mHUB. We should have come to Chicago. We were in Syracuse to look there because there was plentiful water and power. There were some issues in New York that didn't represent quite the perfect fit. I was telling Haven a story. We were in Texas for a few weeks. This is very quiet due diligence on the part of the 3 or 4 of us, and they didn't have contiguous land in Dallas, and the governor, extremely anxious to land the investment, sent us down to Waxahachie, about 25 miles south of Dallas, and we talked to the town manager there, and the biggest thing they'd ever built in Waxahachie was the high school football stadium. And I tried to explain that, you know, 1 wafer fab was about the size of 12 football fields, and we use about 5 million gallons of water every day. And he thought that was 5 million gallons of water each year for the fab. So Waxahachie, Texas didn't work out. And then we got to Phoenix, and Governor Ducey greeted us that weekend, and Mayor Gallego as well, and they had thousands of acres of land. The STEM talent in Phoenix is extraordinary, from ASU to others. The power generation, which you need a lot of, was incredible. Water, Haven was asking me earlier about water. We will end up recycling 100% of our water. So if you use 5 million gallons of water per fab, we build out 6, that's 30 million a day. If you're reclaiming and recycling water, we're building 2 facilities there to do that. Water is not going to be an issue for us. We pull from the Colorado River, but if you're using and recycling water every day, at great expense, but from an environmental perspective, that's the right thing to do. Phoenix then became a very good landing spot. Plus, we got we got tax incentives and other grant types of money, and a foreign trade zone was set up there for us as well. So, and the migration pattern was in terms of people wanting to come to Phoenix and live in Phoenix. And so the engineering talent was excellent, and we sensed that as we recruited across the country and around the world, that we could entice folks to come to Phoenix. And our headcount there is about 3,500 and growing. We started from 0, and that's turned out to be the case.
I know COVID exposed a lot of weaknesses in our supply chain, and one of the outcomes of that was the CHIPS Act and really leaning in America to redevelop foundries and not just be designers of advanced technology that then is made somewhere else. What do you think the U.S. needs to do both to bolster its critical mineral production as well as reclaim some semiconductor production here in the country?
Well, one of the reasons I went to TSMC from Intel in 2019 was to help TSMC come on shore. And they needed federal assistance and federal tax support, and the CHIPS Act was born, in part out of COVID, given the huge shortages. But what happened was that the US government realized that in terms of the actual manufacturing, the fabrication, the making of the chip, what we do in terms of the most advanced technology, performance, functionality, transistor density, thermal, mechanical, electrical capability, that was not happening here. That was a code red signal that had to change. When you look at the whole ecosystem, way upstream to us are the electronic design automation software players. That's Synopsys, Cadence, Siemens. Qualcomm and NVIDIA and AMD buy that software from those types of EDA players. The tool makers are all here. Cadence, or KLA, Lam, Applied, they're all American. So the fabless players, the tool makers, the EDA players, all American, all in a leadership position. But in terms of actually making the chip for US national and economic security, the best was happening in Taiwan through TSMC. And so given the constructive affirmative relationship between Taipei and Washington and TSMC's requirements, we were able to get the CHIPS Act passed. That was when CC and Mark hired me. They said, can you do this? Can you establish a relationship with the federal government and get legislation passed? And I was unsure at the time, but I said, of course I can do that. And as it turned out, it's worked out very, very well. And Phoenix is growing and growing and growing. And other companies have benefited. It's not just about TSMC. Huge investments by Samsung in Texas. Great investments by Intel. And then TI, another chip maker, and Micron and others have all benefited from the CHIPS Act. And so a rising tide of federal support has lifted all boats. But that's not to say in terms of other like materials, chem inputs, there's still work to do. And in terms of ensuring that the United States is not constrained by Chinese rare earths supply. So more work to do, but the CHIPS Act has been a very, very big success.
And so the other part of policy in the U.S. right now is tariffs and export controls as part of this overall chips war.
Right.
How are you seeing this play out, and where does it end?
That's a good question. The tariff issue has become so complex at so many different levels that at some point, through one negotiated agreement after another, country by country, I think the Trump administration will make progress in extracting more foreign direct investment from the likes of Japan and Korea and Vietnam, and tariffs will lower over time. No deal struck yet with Taiwan. I want to be careful what I say in front of my Taiwanese government officials here. The negotiations involve additional FDI coming from Taiwan to America. That's TSMC as well as some other companies, and eliminating the tariffs. through a trade pact. So I think there's more work to do on the tariff front, and I would take a long-term strategic view about how that ends. On export controls, the United States government is incredibly powerful on export controls. And what they're trying to do is protect an extraordinary advantage that they have in the most advanced silicon, most advanced integrated circuits, to ensure that countries that don't have our best interests at heart do not benefit from fabless companies selling those types of chips and a Western-aligned company like TSMC making those types of chips for the likes of North Korea, Iran, and China as well. So on a regulatory basis, the United States is really, really powerful, and it has demonstrated that in recent years.
Let's go back a little bit about workforce in Arizona and how you would assess workforce as part of the selection process. What sort of learnings did you take from the amazing workforce that has been developed in Taiwan around TSMC's production, and how are you importing those learnings to develop a new skilled workforce here in the U.S.?
Right, that's a good question. There's such extraordinary discipline and structure in the Taiwanese workforce for TSMC. We're about 82,000 globally, probably 85% of which is in Taiwan, but the footprint is growing rapidly. And so culturally and in terms of processes, we're integrating American hires, FTEs, into Phoenix. It's a learning process. It's a learning process for me. I've been there for 6 years, and I answer to the CEO and the general counsel, and the work ethic and the team orientation that is bottom up in Taiwan is exquisite. And you see it inside of TSMC, and it's led to the extraordinary success of the company. And so I think there's an adaptation occurs with younger and older STEM talent that's coming from within the semiconductor industry. I mean, if you're TSMC, you're going to recruit a double E PhD type from Georgia Tech, and that might be a younger person, but then the older person that's maybe migrating over from TI is going to face a different sort of work culture and shift. And so far, so good, but it's different. And so we'll continue to work on that to acclimate people to how we work as a team. The management committee, there's 7 or 8 people that run TSMC. They don't dictate to process design engineers new performance requirements as we move from N2 down to A16, 1.6 nanometer, 16 angstroms. They listen to the engineers from below on a team basis to dictate how many more transistors that we can fit on an integrated circuit. And that's the kind of teamwork that occurs at TSMC. It's a bottom-up culture, not a top-down culture.
And with the, getting down to 1.6 nanometers, right? We've forever been operating under this sort of Moore's law theory, where every 18 months the power of the semiconductor would improve by half, the cost would go down, and we're sort of reaching the limits of that. How are you all thinking about that from a manufacturing perspective, new materials perspective, or stacking perspective, cooling? Like, what are you thinking about to advance chips and make sure that we're continuing on that path of better pricing and more power?
Moore's law is alive and well. I'm a JD, I'm not a double E, so I need to be careful about how explicit I am. I think this is a room of a lot of engineers. At A16, 16 angstroms, and at 14, and at 10, at 7, transistor density expansion will continue. I noticed on the roster of attendees, there was someone maybe from IMEC. Did the IMEC person come today? IMEC is the European Research Institute in Leuven. that is working on something called CFET, and which is stacking chips vertically. I mean, you just mentioned stacking. I'm not sure if that's what you were referencing, but that's where you go. Horizontally, we're expanding transistor density on the substrate, on the facial part of the CPU or the GPU or the FPGA, but then we'll go up, and that's CFET technology. So that is a function of Moore's law. So the future is really bright, and U.S. leadership in all these spaces with TSMC and Phoenix, I would say, is really bright. It's about innovation. It's about experimentation. It's about failing, and we put an enormous amount of money into R&D, and I would say that we're ambitious and confident as the leading chip maker, underlining the word maker, globally.
When I look at the TSMC model, it's really enabled new businesses like NVIDIA and Qualcomm,
Right.
and accelerated the pace of innovation there. How do you all work together as they're thinking about new chip design? You're advancing production to ultimately get to a place where you're designing in partnership with them.
I'd say that the partnership and the collaboration and the synergy and the symbiotic relationship, and let's talk about NVIDIA, is incredible. And it's in the same room together, and as we'll develop their chips 2, 3, 4 years out. Their next chip is called Rubin, and TSMC will deliver that in the summer of '26. And Blackwell is out there now and is predominant in the AI space, which you may have heard about. The preceding chip was their Hopper chip. These engines are stunning for AI, but it comes from the engineering prowess of the two companies together. Jensen Huang was in Taiwan 5 times in '25, and he was just in Arizona, and he had a Blackwell chip that he framed out and then gave to the president, but he didn't invite us to that meeting, actually. Like I was magnifying the picture, and it was like, TSMC Arizona Blackwell chip, and I was like, well, maybe I should have been in the Oval Office with the president, but it's okay. It's like two twins, and they're not the only ones. I mean, there are other companies. We have 550 customers, and we have an equitable approach to dealing with all of them. NVIDIA, I mean, they're just stunningly good in terms of the ingenuity of that chip, that graphics processing unit, which is lots of cores, and then huge parallel processing capability that came from their gaming functionality. That's what they started with, and that translated over to AI in an incredible way. But the MI450 chip is from AMD is extraordinary. And then what's happening is I was just watching on CNBC after I landed this afternoon a couple hours ago in my hotel room, Rivian. You see a lot of Rivian cars, right? They look pretty cool. And the CEO of Rivian they've designed a chip that I think we might make it for them, that they don't have to buy an NVIDIA chip for their Rivian AVs. They can send the design to us, and we'll work with them. And so instead of a fabless player being the interlocutor and marking up price, you'll have a lot of ingenuity from the end users themselves, like OpenAI and others. And Rivian, I was listening to the CEO this afternoon, and I was wondering, I was like, we must have him if he's talking about they're going to design the chip and they're trying to skip NVIDIA, it comes back to us, because they have to have someone, Rivian has to have someone to make that chip for them. And for AV purposes, level 4 autonomy and everything else you want in a car, which is what he's talking about, with that type of a chip, that comes back to TSMC.
So obviously you guys have had incredible growth with smartphones, consumer electronics, energy industry, industrial, now with high performance computing, AI. What's next for you? What are the industries that you're really focused on? Here in Illinois, we're making a huge investment in quantum. Like, how are you thinking about quantum or humanoid robotics? Like, where is it all going for you?
Well, I think before you get to quantum, I think the here and now are AI applications. I mean, it is so breathtaking. It's not to be believed in terms of the revolutionary nature. It's not evolutionary. And so the business for A16 chips, for GPUs, for accelerators. I was watching TV and Broadcom reported their earnings at 4 p.m. and they produce ASICs, application-specific integrated circuits. They're worth about 1.8 trillion. And so in terms of the AI wave, that's an incredible company too. And so the thing you have to keep in mind is the enormity of the different types of applications beyond ChatGPT 5.2, which got announced today, and Claude, and the different, like Gemini 3. I don't know, has anyone downloaded Gemini 3 from Google? That's a fascinating platform. Think about it in terms of AVs. Think about it in the healthcare space of how AI computationally coming from the chip is going to change healthcare. And maybe I'll give you a personal example. So with AI, you use large language models, right? I think everyone understands that, to grind and crunch data. And then you use inferencing as the next step for purposes of pattern recognition. And that leads to more intuition and cognitive and deeply improved no longer guesswork, but you can look at modeling in a way that will help in the scan space. So last week, this will be a personal story. Last week I was in the hospital. I was getting, who's had a colonoscopy before? Anybody had a colonoscopy? So I was, all right, so everyone here should go through that process. I've done it any number of times. I have, on a serious note, I have some colon cancer risk in my family, and so Erica Cohen, my gastroenterologist, had me on the table on Thursday morning, and I went through this process, and she and I were talking about AI. And, you know, it could be an MRI, it could be a CT scan, it could just be a simple X-ray. If she had hundreds of thousands of scans put together, and this is where AI will help her, and she's, you know, looking through me, and she sees something, she can make a better predictive judgment about whether something deep inside of me ultimately will lead to cancer. You're trying to take the guesswork out of it, and my scope went very well. I don't have cancer. It was a good week for me. But every one of you, in different ways and shapes and forms, it can be extraordinary just in the healthcare space. And that all comes from the chip, from the computational ability to take an enormous amount of data and through pattern recognition, help doctors and radiologists make better judgments about what the future might hold for all of us.
So like the application of AI is endless right now.
Huge.
But we're also hearing about a bubble, right? In the way that the industry is making massive investments in CapEx right now that is sort of at a unsustainable rate to repay against those. There's like unique ways that there's a lot of revenue sharing between a very succinct set of players and some depreciation schedules that are not perfectly aligned with the technology. You all are very CapEx heavy. How do you think and insulate yourself if there is an AI bubble going on right now?
Right. I think Jensen said it best on his call the other day, on his investor call, which is, you know, they see things differently, and we see things differently as well in terms of the extraordinary promise across sectors for AI to strip out arbitrary, mistaken judgments in the safety of vehicles, for example. I have my two sons were down in Phoenix, and they were in a car going 40 miles an hour with no driver, and I was like, "Why are you guys doing that?" And you know, Waymo still makes mistakes, and so in terms of passenger safety, in terms of the healthcare examples I was still using, there may be some ups and downs, but the CapEx expenditure by the big five players on data centers, I think in 26 will be about $450 billion to build out the LLM and inferencing footprint is incredible. And so the benefit is there. There could be some ups and downs if there's a sideway, if there's an inflection point from fiscal policy. I mean, things might slow down, but from where we sit over the long term, the benefit and the promise is simply extraordinary for all of us in a positive way. There are some negatives. There could be some attrition in employment ranks and what have you, but everyone here, in some way, shape, or form, potentially could benefit greatly from the applications expanding, diversifying, deepening in so many respects. And it starts with our chips, but the platforms are endless. There are thousands of people out there trying to innovate and create new platforms versus the examples I've given on cars and healthcare.
And I think we left off a little bit about the quantum conversation. So, like, how are you all thinking about quantum? Where does it impact your future growth? Where do you see the technology and sort of the evolution of compute happening with quantum?
I think there's an inflection person here. That there are a couple quantum people here, and we have not talked about quantum as much. We think and I'll defer a little bit to some of the public quotes from management committee members, if quantum is coming in a 10-year time frame, but not readily applicable today.
More of a fusion comes first or quantum comes first? It's always a 10-year out technology.
That's as much as we've said
Yep.
publicly, and so I don't want to misconstrue what TSMC, our top, YJ Me, and the other top engineers have said to date.
So what's next for TSMC? What's the next breakthrough?
Well, I think you go down Moore's Law road. I think you continue to build out your footprint and strengthen it in Phoenix. Our head count will grow. The promise of the technology is certainly there, but we will have to invest enormous amounts of money at a $45–50 billion a year rate to build these wafer fabs. And we'll do that all over the world. Taiwan is central to all of that. That's where the company was born, is incorporated, and is run. But from our perspective, the future is very, very bright. And our model, because we've invested so much money on the leading bleeding edge, which is the fastest chips and the highest performing chips, which I've talked about, which undergird AI and so on. There won't be a lot of companies that are able to do that, but the benefit to the hundreds and hundreds of fabless companies, given the dynamism of the industry, is what we're focusing on. We want to serve those customers. They're the CEOs in this room on the front row that I've hypothetically mentioned. Semiconductors are not going away. They're central to your life in such a constructive and an affirmative way. I think 10 years ago, semiconductors were kind of boring, and most people were not that interested in them. But I'd say the future is very exciting and bright.
What advice would you have for the entrepreneurs here? I mean, every single one of them build technologies based off of chips, semiconductors. I mean, how should they be thinking about the future? How should they be thinking about emerging market opportunities?
Well, from the small portion of people that I saw of the individual Mike Chesney was trying to develop a more consistent and easier to use EKG framework. Think big, dream big, try big. That's what TSMC did. That's what TSMC did. And Jensen, when he was speaking a few months ago about where he was, I mean, he was literally down to his last $500,000, and Sequoia helped him. Don Valentine, a very famous venture guy. I think there's venture people in the room too. It's a combination of government, venture capital, the innovative ideas you have. Just listening to Mike, if I was a venture capitalist, I'd be very tempted to invest in what he was trying to do, because EKGs are difficult and constraining and not easy to apply. So it's the basis from which TSMC came. They were nothing. It was an idea that Morris Chang had, and look what it's grown into. And Jensen Huang is the same, most valuable company in the world, the 7th most valuable company in the world, started at a place like this. And that's what struck me when I walked in here, of getting people to help you financially. I mean, you need the seed corn, you need that investment money, and it seems like you've set up an operation here that could lead to big things for people that have big ideas.
At mHUB, we're awe-inspired every day. Like, we get to help create a house to help people have access to equipment, access to industry, access to each other, and the problems and opportunities that they're creating are just incredible. And it was a crazy time during COVID when a lot of our teams were getting purchase orders and they couldn't get chips. And it was 52-week lead times, and it was infinite lead times. And 52 weeks for a startup is death. Like, they're operating month to month, and it also created a lot of I think resiliency, because they had to think about different sourcing, where they got chips, and how they engineered their products to not just be the most advanced chips, but be the sufficient chip, right?
When during COVID, we buy a new car once every 7 or 8 years, and I was buying my wife a car, and we were doing it during COVID, and I showed up at the dealership, and we were arguing about the cost and the financing, and then I had to write down where I worked, and he's like, "Oh, you're the problem." And I was like, "Oh, no." He said, "No, yes. And he said, "Where are my damn chips? And we can't sell cars. It's all your fault." And I was like, "Oh, mamma mia. Why did I tell him I worked at..." What's that? Well, no, but I was just like a light bulb went on. He was looking and said, "You're the problem." And I said, no, it's not me. No. But yeah, COVID was an interesting time, and all these factors play into it: resiliency and opportunity. And chips do undergird a lot of innovation. And the bill of materials on a car, on a fancy car, is on semiconductor silicon, probably $1,000. A Tesla's probably $1,400-1,500 in terms of silicon inside that dashboard. And so we'll do our part. We're capacity constrained, but I just go back to when I did the tour here earlier of just wow, the next great innovator. It could come from the hallways here, and that's what's super exciting. If you get helping hands on the money from the federal, state, and local folks to help grease the wheels a bit, to finance your great ideas. I mean, this is the lifeblood of America. The innovative capacity of this country, greater than any other place. I mean, what TSMC did in Taiwan is fantastic, but the most innovative country in the world with the greatest talent is here in the United States, maybe even in Chicago.
Definitely in Chicago. With that, I would love to open it up to some questions. There's some mics that will get passed around. And we'll start here, right behind you, and you'll be next.
Hi, Nehal Gandhi. Question for you. You said you build chips for pretty much everyone, including Rivian, if that's AMD, Jensen Huang.
Mm-hmm.
How do you not cross-contaminate IP? You're sitting with engineers from everywhere.
That's a good idea. I mean, that's a good question. I mean, there are... I think there's just enormous integrity in terms of what Rivian might propose versus we make Google's TPU, and that's a separate channel. And then the architecture, the design architecture of Hopper, Blackwell, and Rubin is off the charts. That's why they're the kingpins. And then the relationship between TSMC and AMD is so sacred and so close over so many years that their MI450 chip, which will compete over time and grow share, but the Zen architecture that AMD produces is something that that we protect and have enormous integrity about. And that's why TSMC is so trusted. We oftentimes don't have enough capacity, and that's what really agitates Lisa Su and Jensen Huang and the others, that they want more and more and more from us. We'll produce 17 million wafers, and 26, it's not enough. But that's a good question, and I just think there's just enormous care and certitude about that fabless player's design and us building to the spec, but us telling them through our PDKs, our process design kits, like, you can't do this. I mean, Blackwell has 208 billion transistors on it. That's enormous. But our job is to tell them what you can do and what you can't do, because we're the ones that make the chip for them.
Thank you. Alex, Matthew. Thank you, Peter, for being so approachable. I mean, it's really nice to have this setting. I'll take this back to the geopolitical aspects that you mentioned. One of the things that we're working on and others are concerned about that we work with is the critical minerals, gallium, yttrium, samarium, all these things that the US does not have deposits of that. We rely on other countries, other places, and I think Taiwan also, to a large extent, depends on that. So yes, we need to, firm up a supply chain, but one of the aspects could be, say, recycling, better recycling of electronic waste, e-waste, more targeted. But in general, what is your opinion about these critical minerals which would affect your supply chain from both geopolitical and just from a availability viewpoint?
No, that's an important question. The Undersecretary of State for Economic Affairs tonight is holding meetings today that he wanted us to come to on critical mineral supply and ensuring that the United States is not victimized by China, for example. Well, as a company, we're probably one step ahead of that. We dual source, and for example, when Ukraine was invaded, Ukraine, of all places, I didn't know this, is a huge supplier in neon. And we get neon from Ukraine, but we get it from other places as well. And helium would be another example. There are dozens and dozens of these inputs, so that as a company, TSMC has a dual sourcing approach. Makes perfect sense. We're not vulnerable to Chinese restrictions or stoppage of rare earths. But that's not to say that there shouldn't be more improvement. The United States is investing in MP materials and other types of companies to broaden the base, and I think that's extremely prudent. I think at a federal level, the Trump administration understands the problem. It takes a long time, though. It sounds like you're pretty educated in this space, and it'll take many years to functionally ensure that there are not choke points that Beijing might control. But as a company, we've been exceedingly careful to ensure supply from as many multiple locations as possible. It's such a curious audience. This is great.
Yeah.
No, over here. We got to go to the right. Her, on the aisle.
Sorry.
She's got the peace signs up the whole bit. Yeah.
Thank you, Kimani Isaac. My question is, you mentioned earlier about the water usage that would be required, and that was part of how you landed in Arizona.
Correct.
I'm curious, from an environmental perspective, how do you think about resource usage long term so that we don't generate political instability domestically?
Well, water is the key element. in manufacturing, and when you're washing a chip through etch, dep, and taking all the steps. And so we're doing everything we can. We're spending our own money to ensure reclamation and recycling. We try to be as environmentally prudent and careful and constructive as possible. Wafer fabs, I'm not sure if you're asking about carbon emissions or not, but there are processes that we can spend to reduce our carbon emissions from our factories. We try to be good stewards. It's not entirely easy. I mean, there are hundreds of different types of chemical inputs in fabrication, and the most important technology product on planet Earth is the semiconductor. And the most advanced semiconductors have to be manufactured here. And so we work with the EPA and the White House and others to ensure as much integrity as possible in the manufacturing process.
Okay, sorry. So just for background, I also began my career as a Senate staffer.
Oh,
and
well,
now,
where are you? Who's
oh,
speaking?
hi. Sorry.
okay.
I had the mic before, but it got taken away. Yeah, so I began my Senate career also as a Senate staffer, became a lawyer, and now I work for a chip design company. It's actually
Fun.
a quantum computing chip design company based here in Chicago.
What's your name?
My name is Hannah Parnes.
Who'd you work for on
I
the
worked
Hill?
for Senator Blumenthal and Senator Leahy in the Senate Judiciary Committee.
Oh, those
Yeah.
are big deals. Those are big folks.
It was a lot of it prepared me for this, you know. So my question is this. I understand there's things you can say, things you can't say. What I can say is that our technology is CMOS compatible, and we've already done tape outs with a US-based semiconductor foundry or commercial foundry, and we'd love for a larger scale production run at TSMC. If you're not quite there yet, so be it. But my question is, what are you doing to anticipate the capacity for the technologies of the future, whether it's quantum computing or another innovative chip technology, so that when there is this increase of demand for foundry services for either quantum computing or something else, how will TSMC be ready to meet that demand and meet the capacity needs?
Oh, that's a hard question. It's not easy. We spend a lot of money, enormous amount of money. And so, we've been short capacity for 4 or 5 years. That's public, a matter of public record. We'll produce 17 million wafers. And that may not sound like a lot, but if you understand the chip business, there can be thousands of chips on a wafer. So you do the math, and it could be upwards of 1 trillion chips that we make in 2026. The business is so capital intensive that we'll try to meet demand right where it's at so that our fab utilization rate is high. If we oversupply and our fab utilization rates are far lower, that's extraordinarily bad for us. We have to utilize the 35, 40 fabs in Taiwan at an 85% rate or better, and we want the same type of utilization rate overseas because the amount of money at stake is just staggering. And so we do what we can to meet capacity demands. I think what we find sometimes is the customers might overestimate what they need, and then we make a judgment about what is equitable across all these 550 customers. So that's how we approach it. But I don't think you'd ever see us overproducing and over constructing fabs. I think like three years ago, Sam Altman said that TSMC needs to spend $7 trillion and build 36 fabs around the world, and that's not how the business works. That's just not how. You don't want to create an oversupply of GPUs that drops the NVIDIA's GPU price so that Sam Altman gets extremely inexpensive GPUs. So there's a natural inflection point in terms of capacity, and we do everything we can to meet customer needs.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Awesome. So with the drive to make sure you're utilizing your capacity or making sure you're at that perfect balance,
Correct.
what kind of innovation are you deploying now or in the future that you think will be able to optimize that, both from a operations standpoint, from a robotics standpoint, from a supply chain? You can choose wherever your focus is, but I'm sure you guys are innovating how to maximize that with the new technology out now. How are you using that?
Well, that's kind of a hard question. I mentioned our headcount and where it's at, and in terms of, I don't see like humanoid robotics taking over our fab floors. There's a limit. It's not a lot of process design engineers necessarily on our fab floors. There's certain limits on that. AI might create some operational efficiencies. We have 3,000 suppliers around the world, and that can get inefficient sometimes in terms of supply chain resiliency. The biggest cost we face every year, we'll make about 120 this year, 120 billion, and I think our capex will be about 48 billion. Like we pour so much into expanding our footprint that I think that's what worries us the most, that there's some cataclysmic type of event where we've expended on CapEx and that drops our margins. But the management committee, CC and Mark, YJ and Jonathan, there's a ruthlessness of efficiency in terms of how we spend money. Like, I mean, they let me buy pencils. I'm not staying at the Four Seasons here in Chicago. So that's a real, I think that reflects extremely well on the company in terms of how they pour money into R&D and building new fabs. Okay, we'll go with Jensen Huang here.
Hi, Nicola. Thank you so much. I think it was Jerry Sanders at one point when GloFo was still in AMD said real men have fabs. On paper, we can look at 18A, 14A, EMIB, backside power, you name it. Technologically they might be there, but we see that just the pure kind of foundry play seems to be working. I'm curious what you think kind of the sustainability of the IDM model is going forward.
Right. That model is going to have difficulty competing against a pure play dedicated foundry. We do one thing, we focus on one thing, and we do it really, really well. When you are an IDM, like Samsung and TI and Intel, you're designing a chip, you have tens of thousands of design engineers, and then you're making, it's complex. It's a hard business. And so what's happened is, I've cited these examples of Broadcom, fabless, worth 1.8 trillion, NVIDIA, fabless, AMD, huge, great, fabless, Marvell, fabless. That's just a natural way that the industry has gone in terms of splitting. Morris Chang figured this out a long, long time ago, and that's why TSMC, as the first mover, and given all of the innovative capacity and the talent and the people and has really sustained the lead. But I think that the IDM model will struggle, like against Global now is increasingly good on the legacy side. They don't compete against us on the leading bleeding edge, but UMC is tremendous. They're Taiwanese based. When you just do one thing, you specialize in just one thing and making that chip, if you come in and you have lots of different elements to your company as an IDM, I just think it's more difficult.
We have time for one more.
Sorry, fellow Chicagoans, I have a Phoenix question. Hi, it's Shana McGee. I'm CEO of SeedSpot, which is a national nonprofit based and grown in Phoenix to do entrepreneurial training.
Great.
First for adults, also for youth. So my question for you, listening to what you're thinking about from a workforce perspective, listen to others plan a team. That sounds like customer discovery and entrepreneurship. So tell me a little bit about how you are or are not thinking about entrepreneurship training and the skills needed for the workforce of tomorrow.
Yeah, we recruit lots of different people down in Phoenix. It's
Yeah.
not just PhDs, mechanical engineers. We have technician assistants. We use Estrella, a lot of different Maricopa County community colleges to come work for us. And so we've worked with Mayor Gallego. She's fantastic, as well as it was Governor Ducey. He was excellent. Governor Hobbs is fantastic to find different segments of the workforce to find a place at the site. We started at 0. We're at 3,500 now. There has been a lot of expansion. There will be more expansion. We're in the process of buying 900 acres of more land, which will be more headcount. The Phoenix City Council will meet on the 17th to approve that. Then we'll actually buy the land on the 7th of January. And the good news will keep coming. And so different types of skill sets, different types of people, even high school graduates will have a welcome opportunity to come work at a place like TSMC. And it's really, we're about 25, for those of you, you're from Phoenix, you know where we are. We're at 23, 24 miles north of the airport. But it's going to be a great opportunity for job generation, local economic development, expanding the local tax base, and then we benefit too. I mean, we make these incredible chips there. We're making NVIDIA's chips, so we win. The city wins, and the local community wins, and the workforce wins.
So unfortunately, we're out of time. Sounds like or when I look around the room, lots of people with lots of questions. We probably could sit here for another hour, but I just want to thank you for coming. Elizabeth for bulldogging, creating this opportunity.
Where's Elizabeth? She did a fantastic job. I've been emailing with her back and forth. She's a very persuasive individual, so thank you, Elizabeth.
Well, thank you. I know you don't accept often, and you flew in for this, and I think it means the world to this community of innovators. So round of applause for Peter, please. Just because the Q&A is over doesn't mean the night's over. Peter's going to hang out. We have drinks. We have food. Please stick around, mingle. Want to thank you for all coming out. This is our last mHUB specific Industry Disruptors event for the year. There's a whole calendar of events getting planned out. But if you are interested in relevant topic, next week we have an industrial AI event with our partners Omaxon on December 16th. So it's a great another panel of speakers and thought leaders in the space. But thank you. Enjoy the evening. Have a great rest of 2025.